Mm-hmm. And my BOGO question is directed at the Reverend, actually.
Okay.
You mentioned people leaving the church for one reason or another. We have a large number of people who are leaving this year, and we calculated it's about a quarter of our pledge value, and we are looking around and scraping and thinking and scratching our heads trying to figure out how do you compensate for this, how do you direct this to the congregation without getting into moaning and crying, and try to get that back up to where it was.
Well, it sounds like you might want to get your community together and just really start from there processing what can be done. A small group of leadership might want to get together, and that might be the situation where here's the sad story, here's the solution. So like if your leadership has a sense of what happened, then like if you know people left because of a job or because of conflict or because of whatever, then to use it as an opportunity to get back together on the same plan. Obviously that plan's going to be modified down, and because you're going to have to start with where you're at. But you can also identify where you want to be. And it sounds like a situation where you really need to just talk to each other and see what's going on and how you can recover from it. But I wouldn't do it in just an open free-for-all kind of thing, because that generates a lot of anxiety. Right. And really having some kind of solution in mind really does give people a point to start from, to say, well, you know, okay, I've got a can of coins at home I'll bring in, or you know, that was a simplistic way of looking at it, but some kind of thoughtful, you know, people give because they don't want to give to the sinking ship, so you have to show them you're not a sinking ship, but we've got the situation and how we're going to deal with it. This is one way, what do you think? It gives them a basis to start from.
Okay, thank you.
Or call in a consultant.
The money for that.
Hey, Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have our APF. Chris is willing to do it. She loves the way I volunteer for things.
Or I volunteer you.
She volunteers me. Our church at Southwest, we've just got our first building, and we're trying to wrap our arms around how much does it cost to run this building. And at the same time this year, we're going to present a mission budget, which is going to be a real interesting feat to do. We tried doing the mission budget a few years ago, but I don't think we really understood how to, and I think this year we've got a better understanding. So I hope it helps bring in more money. But one thing I've noticed is we've never done a real good job with new members for pledging, because we have a line item in the budget for new member pledges, and it's very low, and it's always been zero. This year we have a new member ceremony tomorrow, and I think Chris said that two of the new members have already made new member pledges for the rest of the fiscal year.
Good.
And I think the whole thing is that we've been presenting a new vision of stewardship in the congregation, and the culture of money is changing in our congregation.
Right, and we also talked about it at the new member orientation, which we've always done, but what was different this year was we said, you don't need to pledge now, but if you'd feel more comfortable, we'll send someone to your home to discuss it.
AKA Vinny.
We will follow up.
And the thing is that I noticed that one of the members who had pledged had left the church that she was in because all they did was talk about money. And I thought when I saw that, I was just shocked. And I thought she made a very good-sized pledge. And I think it's just how you approach the whole idea of stewardship and explain what stewardship is. And I came from a Jewish background where you had to actually meet a certain financial
obligation,
level, and before you could even be considered for membership. And so this is really incredible to me that you can participate in it just by doing what you think is right.
Over here.
I like how you likened the minister to kind of the CEO in terms of being the figurehead of mission and the spirit of the organization. However, some of our organizations only have a quarter-time, half-time, lay-led ministry, something slightly less than a full-time minister.
Right.
And I'm wondering how we might go about, in our particular circumstance, we have a quarter-time minister, how we might involve him without overburdening the contractual obligation that we have with him as well.
Right. Let's let the panel take a whack
I think
at
it comes down to looking at the specifics of what you think you need him to do the most, him or her, to do the most, and figuring out what is it that your volunteers can take off so that the most important things get done by the minister. And that's something, even with our full-time minister, I think about everything else that has to happen, and what can my committee do that will make it easier for him. If I say, here are the 3 people I absolutely need you to call, the effort of figuring that out is off of him and onto us.
Yeah, I think that kind of idea of developing a strategic plan, again, that's done in business, now being done more in certainly the nonprofit world. I'm sure it's been done on the big college levels, and now starting to be done on the lower levels, but helping to prioritize, you know, what are the goals of the church. And again, having that constant planning, I think, is so important. So it's not just resting on the laurels or, you know, worrying about, you know, just where you are immediately, is to definitely prioritize those needs and see how you can help.
And the other thing I would do is just talk to the congregation about that process, that you've made some decisions about how you're going to have the minister involved, and that, you know, we would like to go this far, but this is what our time constraints offer, so that people can imagine how, you know, having a minister for more time might help them.
Right. I might add, too, that I think one of the things that might be worth doing is to ask the minister to make sure to preach every so often about stewardship. That's one of the things that you have a minister for, is to preach, and stewardship's a perfectly legitimate topic to preach about. The other thing, I think, is that you can ask the minister to, even if they're sort of a form letter, to be sending out thank yous to people, and maybe actually have the minister, for instance, put, is it a he or a her, but sign some of the Canvas literature, you know, over his or her signature, to make it clear that this is important to the minister and not just to the committee. So those are some thoughts.
Yeah, at least indicating endorsement, even if it can't be the personal touch of going out, with a very effective, heartfelt letter or something, that this is so important to me and I personally ask you to, etc.
Thank you.
We've talked a lot about the Canvas process, or the pledge process, and stewardship. One of the things I'm mulling over right now in our church, I noticed in reviewing giving in November or so, I was surprised by a number of members who you know, they're always in the bank. You know it's going to happen. And I haven't seen the year-end results yet, but I'm going to look at that in about a week or so. Do any of you have any experience with following up after the end of the year if somebody's payment against pledge has come up significantly short, especially people who have been stable givers and at higher than average levels?
Well, let me take a crack at that just initially. Back when our church was a lot smaller, when I first joined it, the fellow who was treasurer at that time used to report regularly to the board, not by name, but just how many people were at a certain level below their target, you know, below where they should be in their pledged giving at a given point in the year. And he personally took it upon himself to contact people who were, you know, had large deficits like that. As we got bigger and bigger and bigger, that became A, very hard to do, and B, he left, and frankly, it was not something that I felt comfortable doing. But what I will say is this: I do let the minister know when I become aware that somebody has fallen badly behind, because I figure that's a warning sign that something is amiss. Either this person's having personal problems, or they're having a problem with the church. I mean, it doesn't happen all that often for me, but every now and then people will write and say, I'm going to have to cut my pledge, or I can't pay anymore this year. And although I certainly do, you know, write back and say, that's okay, you know, we understand that happens, I also always forward that kind of communication on to the minister. And I think the same thing could be true for people who, at the end of the year, you look and say, man, you know, they always pay 100%, and this year they only paid half their pledge or whatever. That might be something for some sort of pastoral attention, as long as the minister doesn't feel uncomfortable with having it brought to his or her attention because of money. Let's see if other people have things to say.
Well, I think if the minister's uncomfortable with the tension, they need to get over it. Because it's you know, I can guarantee it's a pastoral issue. Something's gone on, like, you know, I used to do that follow-up as a layperson in my congregation, and I found out people had been divorced and the minister never called, kids had been sick, I mean, all kinds of things had happened, and, you know, maybe they didn't know, like, well, if your kid's in the hospital, you have to call because the hospitals don't do that anymore. And so, but equally important is when people are increasing their pledges. You know, I don't know the numbers of what my people pledge, but I do know who's increasing and decreasing, and because that is a representation of the spirit that they're feeling. And so if they're like, if they've doubled their pledge, I want to be able to say to them, wow, you know, thank you, and something's working really good here, you know about that.
I think, and Christopher spoke about in the book, that to not address that is the clerical malpractice. So,
it's a little strong.
Yeah. So, yeah, a little strong. But quite important, that follow-up, which oftentimes nonprofits and people aren't good at. Maybe we get through the ask and feel so good that we got through that, and then we're terrible with following up and making sure that actually happens. So
I love this notion too about the importance of thank you letters and that sort of thing for giving and other acts as well. I don't think I've ever gotten any kind of direct thank you note from a minister for giving or anything else that I can recall. You know, and that reminds me, we always talk about, we finished the second year of regrowing face-to-face, and I think we're doing pretty well at it. And one of the prime things is sending thank you notes. Right. I don't know that we've ever thanked any pledger for the actual giving that has resulted. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge. When I always sort of make a generic and broad brush note of appreciation when I write cover letters, which I do with our giving statements, but it's very different from a personalized thank you note. Another thing that occurs to me that I don't know, Al, whether we do this or not at the Canvas level, I've certainly not done it, is when people, particularly people, increase their pledges or make a substantial gift, do you ever ask them, well, what prompted you to do that? What is it about the church or about this particular issue or this particular campaign that, caught your imagination or inspired you enough that you're willing to dig deeper for it? I think that might be a worthwhile inquiry to make, in much the same way that we always try and worry about people who suddenly stop giving. I mean, I think we need to be a little bit more focused on the positive a bit.
Well, there are probably very good lessons in that, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.